what does it look like to build a company on top of AI? We serve 92% of the Fortune 500.
Nate Gonzalez, head of business products at OpenAI. And what kind of traits do you think, the OpenAI PMs that you hire have, or what kind of traits do you look for?
Entrepreneurialism, do they have just very high grit and determination and are willing to work really hard problems? And there's this quote that I love: never underestimate the power of what you can get done, or the amount that you can get done in 10 minutes worth of time. And that's really just stuck in my brain of what can I do with the model to make myself go faster and get these things done and just keep progressing this forward.
You're at the top 1% of using AI to improve your job, right? You're proud of your job. So maybe you can name 3 of your favorite AI workflows that you personally use. Okay, welcome everyone. I'm really excited to have here with me Nate Gonzalez, head of business products at OpenAI. And over 92% of Fortune 500 companies already use ChatGPT Enterprise. So super excited to talk to Nate about how OpenAI builds products, what traits he looks for in PMs, and how he uses ChatGPT personally to save time at work. Welcome, Nate.
Hey, thank you, Peter. Really appreciate you having me. So excited to dig into this. Another thing, just framing wise, yes, 92% of Fortune 500s leverage our enterprise product. We also have millions of smaller companies and enterprises and mid-market companies that leverage our team product as well. So there's both this an interesting motion that we have that's a mix of self-serve and our fully sales managed deploy process, so that with larger, more complex customers, we have our sales team is working directly with them to go get value out of the product. So we cover both ends of that spectrum.
That's awesome. And I'm sure there's also millions of employees just using ChatGPT at work, just their personal accounts. So,
There is plenty of that as well. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you just had some big launch this week, right? So you launched connectors and record mode.
Yep.
Maybe you can briefly talk about what these features are.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the core. So first, let me talk about what it is. We can kind of get into the genesis of it, if that's interesting. Just to start out, what we launched is the ability for companies to connect to their internal knowledge sources. And so, tangibly, what that means is, let's take something like Google Drive or SharePoint. At the company level, kind of at a service account, or at an individual level, say OAuth, the user is able to connect directly to that underlying data source. We respect the permissions that live inside of the organization. And then the model is then able to pull and read from that data source, so that if I ask a question that would really benefit from ChatGPT having knowledge of something that's going inside of my company, I'm able to get that information back. So in addition to all the pre-trained data that ChatGPT leverages and the ability to search the public web, so you kind of get both the large fact base of human history with recency from the web, now you're adding in the private knowledge side. So that's kind of the large part around connectors. Two pieces of that. We've launched 4 different connectors to the biggest internal knowledge sources. Knowledge stores. So your G Drive, your SharePoint, Box, Dropbox, available in ChatGPT directly. And then I think it was 12-ish connectors in deep research, so that you can both combine the ability for deep research to go search the web with the number one requested feature from or feature enhancement from our users of deep research, which is this is awesome. I now want to be able to search over my internal data as well. So I'll pause there, and then we can see if there's any follow-ups, and we can get into record mode.
Yeah, maybe you can talk about, launching 13 connectors, is a lot, right? Maybe talk about how this process went from kind of ideation to launch.
Yeah, sure thing.
And how your team built this.
Yeah, so the ideation on this started a while ago. It's not an unreasonable thing to think out of the gate that, okay, what's gonna the models all get much smarter with more context, right? And so to be then contextually relevant for your business, being able to access data sources and have knowledge of that within your business is really important. And even more so is a foundational building block for us to get agents to a place where they have very high accuracy and fidelity in the actions that they can go take. So be those read actions where you're asking an agent to go do a whole bunch of things for you. ChatGPT is a good example of kind of that agentic capability to go do deep research, to go pull internal knowledge for you and bring that back, or the ability, to eventually start to take right actions with agents where now they can go execute on your behalf. So operator is a good example of this type of capability, both of which benefit from this context where it's, now I'm asking a question, I'm directing the model to go do something in the model that has the internal context to operate against that. So that was the general idea in fragging. Now, when this came about, this was prior to the launch of reasoning models, and I think it was what, November-ish, November of last year. And
Okay.
so what we really had was like the 4.0 paradigm, which is very much based on, the very quick call response where a lot of, pre-trained and post-trained knowledge exists that the model is calling on. And so that was how we were initially thinking through the connectors. And so it was like, great, okay, we really need to think about, how are you syncing and indexing repositories? It becomes a, like a really important aspect so that you can drive against that latency and make sure you have a really low latency, really high quality experience. The interesting thing in the shift with the reasoning models is that latency constraint is relaxed to a degree because the model has multiple different turns to go get you the right answer before it
Mhm.
brings back that information. So, reasoning generally works as you ask a question, the model goes out, it forms a hypothesis, it looks at several different variants of that hypothesis in tandem and pulls them all back together. Uh, and so this is how we evolved to be able to scale more quickly on the connectors, in addition to adopting NCP. So pause there to see if that gives you kind of broad context on how we got to where we are.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I mean, I think every company has a wide range of internal knowledge databases, but I think the quality of some of this data could be like pretty questionable. Like some of this stuff is out of date, or so there's probably like a lot of thought that goes into if I ask a question like which files does it pull and like which part of the files is that? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we did a lot of post training on that specifically.
Mhm.
Leveraging our own data, leveraging synthetic data, where we look at that notion of recency uh, and also kind of say seniority of authorship. So the notion
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
a social graph in there as well, of
Mhm.
to be able to like surface the most relevant content. So like just think about somebody who's new and who's onboarding onto the product directly, or sorry, onboarding into say OpenAI. They don't have any deeper context on what's going on. There might be 100 documents that have been written about a specific subject. So we spent a ton of time working to make sure that the most relevant documents are being pulled forward by the model. And you're not just getting a generalized return of here's the 30 different documents written on a topic, like go figure it out.
Mhm. Got it. Um, and yeah, I think I didn't play with it myself, but I saw the video and I think it's amazing. It unlocks
You
so
should.
so much.
You should,
Yeah.
but, I mean, you should tell us what you think, would love the feedback, but, it's for
Mhm.
us, like, we've been playing with it a lot internally. I mean, for months as we've been, in beta and dog food and just really trying to drive the experience. We use it every day, not just like, "Oh, how do we, like, dog food the experience?" To drive our own workflows. And
Mm.
that's, I think, the really important thing for us internally.
How do like I think there's this book called Thinking Fast and Slow from
Yep.
Daniel Kahneman, and I think maybe it corresponds to the reasoning model versus 4.0. Like, how do you decide what to use with this product, or like, when do you want to think fast and slow? Yeah.
Yeah, that decision boundary does exist, right? And
Mhm.
to some degree, this is like post training on understanding the intent of the user question, so that we
Mhm.
can then kind of figure out, okay, great, what's the depth of searching that we need to go do to be able to get the right answer to this question? Uh, and so, like the generalized paradigm is right. Like 4.0 is thinking fast. It's got a whole bunch of knowledge. If you ask me a question on a topic that I know, I can give you a really quick, like summary answer. If you ask me a question on, a deeper question, like, hey, like do a really deep dive analysis on this industry, I probably want to think for a minute, structure that, and bring it back to you. And so
Yeah.
that's a natural decision boundary that exists right now that we push into the connectors product and the connectors experiences.
Got it. And like some of the most relevant and recent information in your company is just like the meetings that happen, right? And the notes that you take during meetings. So that maybe we can talk about record mode a little bit.
So record mode is, you could think about them as two distinct products. But part of the reason that we launch these and we talk about these together is it actually kind of rounds out that knowledge picture. So if we go back to what I talked about earlier, you have the pre-trained knowledge that the model has. then you post train against for specific use cases to make sure that you're really good at answering those questions. Uh, that's the fast thinking paradigm. You have the reasoning paradigm that allows you to then go deeper, which benefits from public search, also benefits from now connectors to your internal knowledge stores, and that's all the information that's written down. And so the big other source of information to kind of round out the picture of what does institutional knowledge look like
Mhm.
is like what we are doing right now, like what is actually spoken in meetings that doesn't necessarily get recorded, doesn't necessarily get you know even transcribed accurately. So you have shorthand notes that you're pushing out to colleagues and you're trying to define action items and the like. And so what
Yep.
we've done is there are many companies that have built, an AI version of recording meetings. There's a ton of fun stuff to go into there that we're going to keep driving into to make that much more feature rich and meetings much
Mhm.
more first class and everything about this. But we also want to have just a generalized capability for anybody to record because the purpose here is actually to take that information and model it just like internal knowledge that you might have with, say, Google Drive. And so then in the future, I can recall from that. I can actually say, great, what did Peter and I talk about 2 weeks ago? And then I can pull back that summary. And then we timestamp that summary. So like the individual action items that would be listed, I can actually go to the underlying transcript from there. And so I'm
Yeah.
able to get the richer context to the degree that I need to kind of traverse between those layers.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an advantage here because, like, meeting notes is just like another knowledge source that a company has. So if you have just like a pure play AI meeting product, it's not as comprehensive as like what this is, right? It's like another part of knowledge they can get, you know.
That's right.
Um, and how did you guys maybe like go a little bit deeper? Like, evaluations are really important for these AI products.
That's right.
So how do you guys decide whether this thing is good enough to launch, or like what kind of stuff do you look at to determine how good the meeting notes are?
Yeah. So the evaluations are really important, and we need to set that initial it's like any metric that you establish. You
Yeah.
first have to align on what the right North Star metric is. You have to then be able to measure it, get a baseline, and start to be able to hill climb quality wise against that baseline. And so that is the process that's in play there. In terms of then assessing what that bar looks like, a lot of that is working both internally in our beta process where we are testing this product every single day. We use this internally all the time. Uh,
Mhm.
so there's very much this notion of like, great, what does the eval look like? Does this actually work in practice as we go play with it? And so like there's the combination of those two elements, and then also external alpha and beta testing that we've done with customers as well, where we take that feedback. We're understanding if customers are actually getting to value, because
Yeah.
there is a version of the eval world where you want to get too perfect before you launch, and I think that's not the general ethos of what we go for. We want to get to here's a really like high quality bar that we set, but we want to get as quickly as possible to user signal because that's really where your evals matter in a very deep sense is
Mhm.
from when we get into product land, making sure that users like yourself and others are getting the value out of the experience.
And is it kind of like just looking at stuff like, like get the user to tell you like how accurate this transcription is, how useful it is, like that kind of stuff
Yeah,
to kind of try to track it? Yeah, got it. Yeah. I mean, my theory of
well,
evals is that,
honestly,
like,
it's
I
not
think,
being new. It's there's
yeah.
accuracy, the transcription that we look for. There's different ways and signals that we do that. So
Mhm.
like we will get the qualitative feedback directly from users. We're able to, kind of collect whether or not it was a good or bad summary and the like, which starts to be able to kind of drive quantitatively. There's
Mhm.
other signals that we look for in terms of like how people think about follow-up questions and the like, whether or not we're actually being clear or returning right information.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I think my theory is that eval just requires like a lot of manual involvement from a lot of people. Just to gotta get the feedback loop going.
I think initially,
Yeah.
yes. And I think
Yeah.
it's a process that generally the industry is working to get, much better because you just realize how important it is to actually build good products in this space, given
Yeah.
the fact that we need AI to be not just, useful, but now much more just reliable, particularly in a work context where the focus is great. If I need AI to drive workflows inside of my company, I need to make sure that it is reliable and accurate.
Yeah. You can't have it hallucinate a bunch of meeting notes. That doesn't. That's not good. Yeah. Okay. And So let's kind of switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about like the product org at OpenAI a little bit more. And I found out, I think from Kevin's interview with Lenny, that there's actually like like 30 PMs or fewer at OpenAI. So I'm just curious, like, why is the PM team so lean? There's like I think there's like 5,000 people now, right? Or yeah.
There's a couple things at play here. I would say
Hmm.
the most important one is we very much want to be the model of what does it look like to build a company on top of AI.
Mm.
And that means how do we extend every single one of our employees? And so, yes, our PM team is lean, like our engineering team, relatively speaking, to if you kind of think about like the size and scope of the business, also relatively lean. And that's because we are leaning into all like every single day, what can we do better, faster, working with the models directly. And so it allows, myself, my teammates, to just extend our own capabilities as PMs to be able to cover more ground.
Got it. So basically, like every PM has AI co-pilots, ChatGPT, or maybe even agents helping them do the work, right? That's kind of the idea. And like, what kind of traits do you think the OpenAI PMs that you hire have, or what kind of traits do you look for?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple that we look for pretty consistently here. It's yeah, entrepreneurialism. Do they have just very high grit and determination and are willing to work really hard problems?
Mm.
I'd say most importantly is product sense. So the ability to deeply understand user needs, creatively brainstorm, be able to justify solutions, and then kind of balance between both the user level of fit for purpose, the product that you're building to the problem statement that you crafted, as
Yeah,
well as the business considerations. How are we thinking through what this actually means for our ability to serve consistently? And then also like always that rubric of like how do you tie it back to the impact? How do we tie it back to the mission? And so like that is the thing that we want PMs to be principally focused on. We also screen very heavily for execution capabilities. Uh, and then too, there's this kind of like we want people who are very curious. Uh,
mm.
and so, yes, it's great if they've got prior experience or deep experience in ML. Also great if they are just super high user empathy and able to dive in and understand what's happening in the ecosystem, how it's evolving, how they use it to better solve user problems.
Yeah. Maybe you want people who are. I mean, personally, I'm always looking to like use AI to be more lazy or to save time. So you want people to like who is trying to integrate AI into their workflows, right?
Yeah,
I
which
think.
I think it
Yeah.
maybe is. I wouldn't frame it as lazy as much as what
Yeah.
what can I go get done faster? I'll just give you an example of like what how I like to use AI and like some interesting framings there. But like
Sure.
one element is like internal research. So I'm trying to get up to speed on what's happening on a specific project within our research organization,
Mm.
or technical implementation of a specific system within our engineering teams. This is now something that I can get up to speed on much faster without endless amount of meetings to sit down and understand. Or you're kind of pulling time from those other teams. So that's another element that lets us all run faster. Is you're able to onboard your own context, not onboarding to a new company, but at the pace that the industry is evolving, being able to consistently almost like re-onboard yourself to like, oh great, here's the next topic. How do I understand that? How would I might now apply this to actual product work? And the other
Yeah.
part is, oh man, there's this quote that I loved from this is probably corny, but the acquired podcast on the IKEA one, where
Mm.
one point in time the IKEA founder has said something like never underestimate the power of what you can get done or the amount that you can get done in 10 minutes worth of time, and it's really just stuck in my brain of anytime I'm like, okay, it's 10 minutes before a meeting, like take a breath, grab a snack or whatever. It's like, what can you get done in this 10-minute period? Like, I've got this laundry list of things that I need to do every single day. I've got that punch list. Like, what can I do with the model to make myself go faster and get these things done and just keep progressing this forward? So I think it's like, it's
Yeah.
less lazy, it's much more focused. How do I become as productive as possible at leveraging the models?
Yeah, I usually like try to get as far as possible with AI, working on a strategy document or doing research. And then only when I get stuck do I like kind of go consult my teammates and then like kind of start the
Yeah,
loop again that way, you
that's
know.
right.
So you can get quite far. Yeah. Speaking of researchers, I mean, like you probably work very close to the researchers and like how do you like how do you plan out roadmaps when you don't really know what's coming, or maybe you do like a couple of months down the line on the model side?
Yeah, a couple ways. I mean, one, it's you take kind of the traditional value-based product operating model of like, three in a box with PM design engineering and obviously our data science colleagues. Like we all kind of scrum together in a pod as you might
Mhm.
expect. And I think the additional part here is the research element. So we do work extremely closely with the research teams to understand what underlying research is happening, the relative maturation of that. We are working upstream with them to develop these products that we are putting out. So there's kind of a stage process. As you think about like research that is more nascent, it's having knowledge of that. So we might think about like what kind of product experiences could we craft there? And a lot of,
Mhm.
again, those ideas can come from multiple different places. They will come from PMs, they will come from engineers, they will come from individual researchers for what type of product capabilities are emergent. What could you now go build to kind of further drive the impact of our mission forward? So there's a lot of bottom up uh, uh, kind of ideas that come out of that. That then what we want to do is drive into like our product road mapping process. So that's
Okay.
I'd say kind of the main way that we end up working there. Uh, yeah, so I'll pause.
Um, like how far out do you guys plan out the problem? Maybe on enterprise side you plan out a little bit further, but like this stuff is changing like every 3 or 6 months, right? How
Yep.
far do you go on the roadmap side?
I mean,
Yeah.
we run a quarterly planning process. The reality of that is, as soon as you wrap the plan, it's out of date, and you're really using it as a trade off framework. And
Mm.
so here are the things that we believe are most important to drive forward the you know how we are getting and delivering value to users, both obviously on the consumer side, also on the business side. Now, based on that, what's highest impact? And so as new things roll out, constantly assessing that list.
Got it. And how do you balance between like, I think one of my pet peeves is like product orgs that just spend a lot of time on internal planning and like internal reviews and they don't talk to customers. I don't think what kind of advice do you give your team on that and find the right balance?
We try to minimize the former as much as possible, the actual
Mm.
process around the road mapping.
Yeah.
Because again, it's such a fluid, constant process of iteration and development that it's not, oh, we have no idea what we might go do next quarter. It's there are so many things that we could go do that we have
Yeah.
pretty high conviction in. How do we actually focus on the right ones that have the highest impact? So that then necessitates the latter part, what you just said. Have we been talking and engaging with customers? Do we deeply understand the analytics around our products and like where they are good or where they are deficient? And we need to like really lean in to make sure that we are getting the right level of impact out of those.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think especially in enterprise side, maybe just talk to like 5 or 10 customers, and then you probably like that's kind of how you build product sense, right? They probably all complain about the same things, or like probably have
Yeah, I
a
mean, we talk to
yeah.
enterprise customers. I would say there's like, I probably end up having 4 or 5 conversations directly a week. And there
Mhm.
are, some of it is like letting folks know what we are doing, what we're planning, getting their feedback very directly. And so, yes, then you still like very specific themes start to emerge. And so you do end up getting that like there's that direct line to customers that both, our product team has, but then also we are in very close partnership with our go-to-market team who are every single day sitting with customers. We have a bunch of feedback loops to get that information back into product. And so then
Yeah.
you have kind of, multiple different sources that we're considering when we're going into planning, when we're building, which are direct user feedback, either quantitative research, and then the feedback that's coming in from go to market. So we have
Mhm.
a bunch of different data and signals that we use.
And can you give an example of you mentioned how ideas sometimes come from the bottom up? Like do you have an example of that from your team or anywhere else? Yeah.
Yeah, again, just good example here. There was an IC back. This was the Canvas project, and so
Mm.
in IC, I believe in the research team pitched the Canvas idea in our first month of the company. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I think it was somewhere around like July 4th break, something like that. Her manager agreed, immediately staffed 5 to 6 engineers, and like that team just formed. It was like kind of like terraforming really quick. There's like, hey, there's a really interesting idea. We think it's super high leverage. These are the reasons why. Who's up for working? Like, who wants to go join and like drive this forward?
Yeah.
It's not like conscription. Like, we need to go pull these people. It's a lot of people like, I want to go work on that problem, and being able to kind of gravitate to like, here's a really important problem. Let's go dive in and solve that now. And so then Canvas became kind of our first major UI update to what had been the initial ChatGPT release. And so you go
Mhm.
from a place where you have just very basic chat interface to a much more rich, experience that has a whole bunch of different applications both now and future, solely from a single individual who was this was not part of her product roadmap or over a specific remit necessarily. It was the best idea wins, and that's what we would drive for. Doesn't really matter where it comes from within the company.
Got it. Got it. So it's kind of like it's all about like being high agency, like taking the initiative, making things happen yourself, right? Yeah, and like yeah, and I guess in the interview process, you're probably not looking for some like you're probably not looking for like some 10-year fan PM. You want people who are like have seen the failures and have the grit.
Yeah,
Yeah, got it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Um, and like what is like? I mean the company moves so fast, man. Like just from the outside, I just see you guys shipping like every other week.
Yeah,
It's pretty wild. But like what? How do you balance that speed with some other stuff? Like what's kind of like the biggest misconception about working at OpenAI?
sure. I mean, I
Yeah.
think one big misconception that I like is that moving quickly like involves cutting corners,
Mm,
particularly around like say safety. And I think the thing to like be 100% grounded on is like our team principally is deeply mission oriented. So when we go back to like several questions you've had about how do we think about what a successful PM looks like at OpenAI, the
mm,
successful PM in OpenAI is 100% focused on what impact am I coming in to drive? And the reason I'm here is because I want to go drive that impact. So that
mm,
question is front of mind as people are thinking through what we are delivering, what we're shipping. So that both pushes the urgency to ship quickly, but also to ship responsibly. So that when there are a whole bunch of things that we pause on that are not ready to go out because we feel like, okay, there's actually a bunch of like safety eval work that we need to make sure that we are hitting the bar against before
yeah.
this goes. So we will hold on. So I think the interesting thing to like think about is like there's a whole bunch more that we could just ship there, but we are actually kind of holding that bar very deliberately to make sure that this is of the quality that is necessary. But again, I think there's a culture around both urgency, how we use our tools, how we can go drive that impact that drives that underlying like kind of speed and execution velocity. And so those things like in you could think about as being opposing constructs, but in reality are not.
It's good to have that tension, right? To like want to have the urgency, but at the same time, you want to uphold the quality bar. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and like just building AI products myself. Like a lot of times, I find like this thing is like if only we had a better model, then this thing would be much bit better. Like it only works like 60% of the time. So let's just wait around a few months until OpenAI ships a better model. I don't know if that's what you guys do.
Months.
Yeah, yeah. Does that happen internally too? It's like if only we had something better. Like just pause until the model
No,
improves.
no, I think it's we have line
Yeah.
of sight or like belief or conviction on what the better model is that would be coming. So
Mm,
let's understand that and understand now what's the right first step to take on the pathway with what we have right now,
okay.
or drive even more focus and urgency for how we accelerate, uh, our efforts to be able to get signal into that model. So in kind of develop it to a better place where it interplays really well with our products.
Got it. Got it. And let me just kind of ask a quick question about impact. Like when you say impact, is it mostly about like business impact, metric impact, or is it like is there multiple ways to measure impact here?
I mean,
Yeah.
the main way that we think about measuring impact is on the like it's how many customers are we serving, right?
Mm,
Both consumer side, business side, within organizations, how many customers have gone wall to wall with us? Are we kind of a blanket default useful tool inside of businesses? Like our like utility is the really important thing for us to understand inside of businesses because I think going back to the mission, the reason that businesses are critical for us is because that's where most of like the very valuable economic work globally happens, right?
yes.
It's like
Hmm.
that is the scale vector for how you drive kind of global impact, global change, in being able to make sure that we are working directly with businesses to help them transform their own industries,
Hmm.
get to drug discovery faster. Elements like that. Those are just that has them just global impact that is super important for us. And so that's kind of the high level way of how we think about impact.
That's true. Yeah. If ChatGPT Enterprise succeeds, it'll make the whole economy more productive. Hopefully. Yeah. And so let's talk about that a little bit more. So what are some like barriers to like getting employees to use AI more in companies, and like what tactics have been useful in kind of overcoming some of them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you rewind to I'd say even last year, I think that the
Mhm.
general vibe that was going on was there was a ton of experimentation within companies. A whole bunch of AI products had just launched. It wasn't immediately clear to folks who weren't playing with these every single day what and how to apply these within the context of their business. And really what we've seen in, going into 2025 is the shift into actual, full deployment of these tools. A lot of the where the value driving use case is coming from. Um,
Mhm.
how do we find those? How do we lean into those? How do we focus our organization around those? That's, I think, been the big shift that we've started to see. And I think one trend that's driving that shift is the internal rise of AI champions, and not, okay, let's get AI to everybody. It's this is how I can help transform my business leveraging AI. And OpenAI, we're going to partner with you to go make that happen. So then this becomes the combination of the product work that my team drives against combined with the go to market work, where we are sitting jointly with customers to understand that, define that, and make sure that they're getting kind of the right level of deployment to drive there. So, specific examples are, with companies like Fanatics, Moderna, Morgan Stanley, where like on the Morgan Stanley side, they're leveraging a lot of our work that's now embedded into their wealth management services. And so they
Mhm.
were like, cool, here's the problem that we think is really, really interesting for us to go solve. That's very high leverage. We will do a lot of things with you, but we're going to focus most of our attention on this high leverage use case. Go crack that, and we'll then move on to the next one.
Got it. And these internal champions aren't necessarily like the CEO or the execs. It can just be some IC or some employee, right?
We'll have, yeah, exactly. There'll be heads of AI. There'll be sometimes heads of different product divisions, often like CIOs of companies who want to drive transformational change. It's a mix of different champions, but and I think that's the interesting thing too, is it's not uniform, not
Yeah.
dissimilar to the way that we talked about with OpenAI. It can be a little bit more bottoms up of there's an exec who feels passionately about what we can go drive and make a change. They're banging the table inside of their company, and we are working with them directly to be able to map to that.
Got it. Okay. So if I was like some employee or like some exec at a company, and like, well, I'm like, hey, like I really want my employees to adopt AI as soon as possible. Like, how do I like? Do you have like some steps that I should go through to
Yeah, I mean,
get this
a
adoption?
lot of it is
Yeah.
like, okay, let's actually define, broad adoption. Yes, great, but to what end,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
We can go drive broad adoption. There's a whole bunch that we can do around like getting people to understand, getting to initial value. There's a lot of product work we can do to to drive people to value and understand like how are you if you're a data scientist versus an engineer, how do we think about the in product work that we do to drive toward value quicker? All
Okay.
right. Like understanding your use case, what jobs are you trying to get done? And therefore, how do we then curate the experience for you? It's like that's a big area that we dive into on the product side, which answers kind of a general question. But I think the
Hmm.
specific question that you asked is then great. What use cases inside of your business or what business processes are highest leverage to focus on? And then
Got it.
wrapping back to with the tools that we have and that we are building out at the speed that we're advancing, what are the one or two bets that we're going to go take internally and dig in on how we then kind of graft AI into those workflows? Because that's again, these one or two vectors of initial change that drive
Okay.
outsized value for those organizations. So I'd say like the general advice by if I can recap that is broad deployment, get this in the hands of every single employee so they get the familiarity because you want them to be fluent in these tools because that's actually how you drive some of this bottom up culture that we have in OpenAI into, any business.
Hmm.
In addition, you also want to be able to find the couple of use cases that you think are just going to drive outsized value for workflows that you have inside of your company today and then focus on those, and that's where a ton of our go to market attention is then specifically focused.
And I guess some of these use cases are kind of what you prioritize, right? Like, looking up internal wiki sources, streamlining meetings, like this kind of stuff, right? Is that, yeah.
Um, I would say no, not necessarily. I think those are all tools to an end. It's more. I have like let's go back to the Morgan Stanley example, right? It's
Okay.
we have a wealth management product. We think that we have an internal metrics for what success looks like there. We have internal aspirations for how big we could grow that market to be. Now, based on that, how do we now structure a product experience that we think is going to be better? How do we now evaluate that and drive progress against that specific goal? And so
Okay.
there's something like connectors, something like record mode are then, building blocks, elements that help you drive that outcome. Like these are
Yeah.
tools to drive an outcome. It's like the purpose is not just tools for tools' sake. It's making sure that you can identify the highest leverage, product opportunity you have within your own business, and then be able to go push this forward.
And have you seen employees at these companies build their own like custom GPTs or what AI workflows that like get broad adoption, kind of like from the bottoms up, right?
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah.
Moderna is a really good example of that. I mean, I'm trying to remember. It's thousands of GPTs, if I'm not mistaken, that have been deployed internally. Again, it really speaks to that bottoms up adoption culture, the ability to create a GPT, share those GPTs with their colleagues, so they get kind of the collective benefit of the knowledge work that they are doing being exposed and extended through GPTs. So I'd say
Yeah.
that, a really common pattern that we found, and that's another one where that was driven by an internal champion within Moderna. And then push down, you kind of get this like, hey, here's an opportunity for you all to go build. And then that's like many different flowers bloom within the company.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that I think OpenAI really has, like being able to share these GP. Like, I have all these like great projects that I want to share with my colleagues, but like some of the other providers like don't let you share it easily. So it's like such a pain in the ass. It's like the GPTs make it so easy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
they certainly do help quite a bit.
okay, so I want to talk about. I mean, you're like at the top 1% of using AI to improve your job, right? You're proud of your job, so like maybe you can name like three of your favorite AI workflows that you personally use to save time at work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's the one I mentioned of, um, doing the internal research, to
Mhm.
like, to get myself smarter, more fluent, up to date. Um, the adjacent to that is external research. I'm gonna be
Yeah.
chatting with a customer. We serve 92% of the Fortune 500. If you kind of think of it like across the industries that spans, being able to, great, how do I understand their company, their context in a way that, well, I understand our products and our product context, we can start to find that mapping so we can get to value much more quickly.
Okay.
And then I think there's the other, there's like the day to day side of this of I've got, you know, all just the productivity side, which is not just, yes, there's drafting emails and memos and Slack messages and trying to make sure that I'm just cranking through those processes much faster. But there's
Yeah.
also a lot of internal data analysis that I'm able to do with the tool directly. The be able
Mm.
to the ability to like understand code that I'm seeing from engineers,
Mm.
and extend my own skill set. So those are the areas that I really focus on.
You're like looking at PRs and stuff. You're you're
At
seeing
least
what
I
they're
can
up to.
understand, like, great, yep, let's understand what went through there.
Yeah, I'll tell you. So personally, I use this stuff too. Like I don't know if you do this, but I go to a conference room and I start like talking to ChatGPT or AI. I'm like, hey, I got this feedback on my document. Okay, what do you think? Here's some context, and then I kind of work with it back and forth.
There's
That's been
well,
super helpful.
there's
Yeah.
that. I think I would say, like, one thing that I do with voice mode specifically, similar, but it is a lot of role play.
Mm.
So, great, I there's gonna be a specific, like, candidate that I'm really keen on that I wanna be able to talk to, like, let's think through the question and answer, or there's a customer interaction that's coming up that's really critical, like, let's work through that. There's a podcast, with a guy named Peter that we're gonna be going to, like, play that role, and let's work through, like, how we go together. So there's a whole bunch of work that you can do to start to have the model assume another personality, so
Mm.
you can start to just hone your own craft and skills and get really crisp on your messaging.
Okay, so you basically like set up a project or something, and then you like upload a bunch of context so that it can be like Peter or be like whoever you're talking
You
to.
can do that. Yes, it's
Yeah.
like you're uploading the context again. This is like where that ability to, like, if you kind of even go back to the top of the conversation, be able to
Yeah.
pull in things like connectors, pull in things like, record mode of past meetings that we have the summaries against
Mhm.
into a project. and be like, great, I want now voice mode to be able to help me understand, has that background context. Uh,
Yeah.
so then now it's able to kind of like play this role or be a thought partner. I will often have it critique uh, something that I've either written or that I'm meant to speak about. You know,
Got it.
here's my initial draft. Like, what am I missing? And or where could this be stronger? What are the weakest parts of this argument? So you
Yeah.
get beyond drafting to the actual quality of the output.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do with it. I have like a coach project. And I do this specifically in ChatGPT because ChatGPT has memory. So like I tell it about my life, and then every quarter I check in with it, and, like get some advice. It's more patient than my wife is, So it's it's pretty nice. Yeah, it's good. Okay, so let's wrap up by talking about the future of product teams, man. We're clearly seeing this trend where maybe AI is going from like co-pilots where you have thought partner stuff to at some point you can like delegate tasks to AI, and then you can go watch Netflix for an hour and then come back and then it'll finish the task, right? So how is it just going to change the PM role? You think every PM will have a multiple AI agents that I manage, or how is it going to?
The goal for us is extending everybody's productivity, and so that's a lot of what we talk about of like what do PMs do inside of OpenAI today.
Mhm.
And so it was really thinking about like ChatGPT is this extension of yourself, of the team as like a virtual coworker. So you can imagine like waking up in the morning, you sit down at ChatGPT, more of a personalized interface, list of interesting like or like tasks that have come in, and then you being able to sit down and being able to say, great, like these are the ones that I want to delegate out to you. Bring them back to me when they're done. I'm going to go like, I'm going to take 1 through 3 on this list and have the model be working against those others. So now behind the scenes, that could mean orchestration with a lot of different agents. But I think like
Mhm.
the focusing the interaction on with ChatGPT, kind of employee by employee, becomes really beneficial to just reduce cognitive load and really have the model do a lot of that. Okay, now I know I need to go deep research, use deep research as a tool. Now I need to go use operator as a tool. And so there's a lot of interesting ideas in there.
Got it. Okay, so it's like a hub where you have like some interns working for you, and then you they kind of synthesize information for you and like do some of the groundwork for you, so you can
I mean,
like
interns
yeah,
who can, do PhD level math and deeply understand any code that's
yeah.
been written. And, so I'd say more than intern, right? I think it felt probably much more like intern, 22, 3 parts of 24. I think as
That's
we've
right.
gotten into reasoning models and just better UI paradigms and UX paradigms with those reasoning models,
Mhm.
I'd say it's much more of like not just an intern, but actually a coworker that you're working with that you trust to go get work done.
Got it. Got it. Okay. That's very exciting. Yeah, I can see the UI evolving beyond just like a simple, what do you want chatbot today interface. So very excited for that. So last question. I think there's like some angst about like, are we all gonna have jobs, white collar jobs, a year or so? Like for people who want to level up their AI skills or maybe join OpenAI, like what's your advice? Like a lot of advice is just like hey, go try the tools, right? But like maybe you have something more specific. Yeah.
It's not just go try the tools. It's how do you make this tools an extension of the way that you do work? Like that's the
Mhm.
important thing. It's not just okay, great. I kind of know what these things I'll do. It's how am I using these tools every single day to extend my own capabilities? Like that's the really important thing. It's again, it's not how do I write emails faster? It's both how do I write emails faster? How do I write better emails? How do I actually think
Yeah.
about the content of the work that I am doing and improving the quality there? And that gets into back to kind of the fluency of understanding, okay, you know, if I ask it to write me a draft email, okay. If I ask it to critique this and point out weak points in the argument, point out key assumptions or logical fallacies that I might find, it actually allows me to improve. And I think
Mhm.
those are the loops that you want to find, not just productivity loops, but actual like quality improvement loops in your own thinking, your own process, and your own output.
Got it. Okay, so it's like PM101 is like you gotta start with the customer. Like, what's your own problems? Like, what do you spend your week on? Like, and what can AI help on? That kind of stuff. If I'm inspired by this conversation, I want to use ChatGPT officially at work. Like, where do I go?
Yep.
Yeah,
Get started really quickly. You can go to ChatGPT team. And again, we made that easier for a lot of businesses. So SSO we enabled was part of the announcement on Wednesday.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the front door. Come in, you're able to self-serve, get started really quickly. And as you want and need much more, advanced compliance features that work with the go-to-market teams directly to kind of find and map, uh, you know, use cases to value. ChatGPT Enterprise is like the really strong product there. Both of them, we have the same privacy guarantees. We never train on your data. So the data in the workspace for either team or enterprise is, you know, never makes it to training pipelines. It's your data. It stays inside of the workplace. You have then a lot of the control, in particular on the enterprise side, a lot of advanced security and compliance controls to make sure that you're deploying AI both safely and responsibly,
Mhm.
relative to your information security, but also the compliance regime that you might be working in, for various different industries.
I really love how your team not only it's not just like, hey, here's like access and go use ChatGPT. It's like, what is the specific problem your company has, and let's solve it together. I really love that kind of attitude.
That's
So yeah,
exactly it.
cool. All right, Nate. Well, thanks so much, man. I learned a lot from this conversation.
Good deal. I really appreciate the time. Take care, Peter.